That means you're not using planning or autonomous execution. Flip side is, when you let it use tools and when it fails, it forms its own hypothesis, right? Because you never touched planning.
I switched to Sonnet 5, but the output quality doesn't feel all that different. I'm just having it generate code in a single shot, and it feels pretty close to 4, 6.
Sherry, aren't you using it one shot?
Yeah, one request. It writes the code done.
Did you see Anthropic's official announcement? Sonnet 5 is billed as the most agentic sonnet yet.
Agentic, huh? I hear that word a lot, but it's kind of vague.
Concretely, it refers to 3 sets of capabilities: planning, tool use, and autonomous execution. Those 3. It breaks down a vague goal into subtasks on its own. It drives a browser or a terminal on its own. And it recovers on its own when something errors out midway.
What Sharina's doing is just asking one question and getting one answer back.
That means you're not using planning or autonomous execution at all. So you're throwing away 2/3 of its capability.
2/3? No wonder I'm not feeling much difference.
By the way, Sonnet 5 just got promoted to the default model for free and pro. Pricing stays $2 input/$10 output through the end of August. And even after September it holds at $3/$15, same as Sonnet 4, 6.
So the price hasn't changed, the performance went up, and I was losing out just from how I was using it.
Today let's take a concrete look at that agentic way of using it.
Planning, tool use, autonomous execution, those 3 are what makes something agentic, right? But I'm still not totally sure what that looks like in practice.
Let's go through them one at a time. First up, planning. Give it a vague goal, and it breaks that down into subtasks on its own. Say you tell it, fix the bug in this repo. It reads the code, figures out the cause, fixes it, and runs the tests, working out that whole sequence on its own.
So a human doesn't have to write out the steps?
Right. You just give it the goal, and it figures out the path there. Next is tool use. This one's probably the easiest to picture. Opening a page in the browser and filling out a form, running commands in the terminal. It can read and write to the file system, even control the mouse and keyboard directly.
Wait, with browser stuff, does it decide on its own how to do things like scraping?
Depending on the situation, yeah. It looks at the page structure and picks the right tool to pull out the data it needs. Last one is autonomous execution. This is where Sonnet 5 improved the most. Even if a command fails partway through, or the page structure isn't what it expected, it notices on its own and replans. It can run through dozens of steps to the end, without a human watching over its shoulder.
So basically, even if something fails, it doesn't give up. It just tries a different approach.
With a one-shot Q&A, there's no need to plan, and there's no failure along the way either. So 2 of those 3 abilities just never really get a chance to show up. Let's take a look at the benchmarks Anthropic published. There's Terminal Bench 2.1, which tests autonomous terminal tasks. Sonnet 4, 6 scored 67, 0%, while Sonnet 5 scored 80, 4%. That's over a 13-point jump.
So the autonomous execution thing from earlier shows up directly in the numbers?
On SWE Bench Pro, it also went up from 58.1% to 63.2%. What's interesting is the knowledge work metric. On GDPVALA v2, which uses an ALO rating, Sonnet 5 hits 1,618. That's higher than Opus 4, 8's 1,615.
Wait, higher than Opus, at a 1/5 of the price.
It doesn't beat Opus across the board though. There's Humanity's Last Exam, which measures pure reasoning ability. Without tools, Opus 4, 8 comes out on top at 49.8%. Sonnet 5 is at 43.2%.
So for problems that need pure thinking, Opus is still stronger.
Flip side is, when you let it use tools and run for a long stretch, Sonnet 5 closes in on Opus. If you're running it agentically, Sonnet 5 wins on cost-effectiveness. Sonnet 5 has this setting called effort level. 5 levels: low, mid, high, X high, and max.
Wait, so it's about how much resource goes into reasoning.
right? You can dynamically adjust the reasoning budget. Anthropic published a Pareto chart, and it's actually pretty interesting. It's from BrowseComp, a browser operation benchmark, plotting cost against accuracy. With Sonnet 5 on high, you get around $7 per task for 79% accuracy. Spend that same $7 on Opus 4.8 at low, and you get 77%.
Same cost, but Sonnet 5 comes out more accurate.
On the graph, Sonnet 5's curve sits to the left of Opus's. The further left, the cheaper you're getting the same accuracy.
Is it the same trend on OS World's computer use?
Sonnet 5's Pareto curve leans left there too. Here's the thing. There's some history behind this chart. Anthropic first published it with a simplified methodology, then later swapped in the standard one.
And the swap made it look more favorable for Sonnet 5.
It's true the x-axis range changed, and that's what made it look that way. But the standard methodology itself is sound, so I think the numbers are trustworthy.
What actually changes when you lower the effort level?
It seems to shift resources toward planning, and cut down on the number of commands it runs. So instead of hitting tools blindly, it thinks first, then acts.
If it's still smart even on low, that sounds usable while keeping costs down.
Did you ever notice Sonnet 4.6 stopping partway through something?
Oh yeah, sometimes if a command errored out, it would just give up right there.
Exactly. 4.6 had this tendency where after one or two failed tool calls, it would just settle for whatever answer it had. Like, I got this far. You'll have to finish the rest manually.
And then the human ends up taking over anyway.
Sonnet 5 changes that pretty clearly. When it fails, it forms its own hypothesis about why, and tries a different approach.
So it's debugging itself and retrying on its own.
Right? That's why the tool chains run longer on average now. That 13+ point jump on terminal bench, this persistence is a big part of it.
So there's an actual behavior shift behind the numbers.
Also, the official announcement says hallucination and sycophancy both went down.
Less likely to lie, less likely to just flatter you too.
It's a quiet improvement, but it matters a lot when you're handing off long tasks. I was looking at that Hacker News thread with 669 comments. It's not all praise, though.
So there's both positive and skeptical takes.
On the positive side, the reaction from Pro plan users is pretty telling. Pro doesn't get Opus access, so upgrading to Sonnet 5 is a pure win for them. There's also a lot of talk about how the plan with Opus, execute with Sonnet 5, combo seems to work really well.
So you hand the planning that needs heavy reasoning to Opus, and run execution on the cheaper Sonnet.
On the other hand, there's skepticism too. That chart swap I mentioned earlier, people are calling it out. The claim is that the methodology got changed to make Sonnet 5 look better.
What about the comparisons with GLM and GPT-5, 3 codecs?
Some people are saying it's unclear how well it actually holds up on price performance. There's another point too, the friction with assisted development.
That's the style where a human reviews the code alongside it as it's written, right?
Right? If it leans too hard into agentic use, it can backfire for workflows built around someone watching over it. Out in the field, the conversation about how to actually split the usage is still very much ongoing.
Wait, so if Sonnet 5 is closing in on Opus, does that mean we don't need Opus anymore?
Not quite. They each have pretty distinct strengths. Sonnet 5's real strength is long, autonomous tasks. Browser automation, terminal operations, scraping, fixing CI, that kind of thing. Tasks where you're hammering tools dozens of times and just need it to push through to the end.
So for everyday use in Claude Code, Sonnet 5 is the one.
And if you want to scale up while keeping costs down, Sonnet 5 fits that too. Opus 4.8, on the other hand, is strong where pure reasoning power matters. On humanity's last exam, Opus is still on top. Things like large-scale refactors or design reviews, where getting it right in one shot is everything.
So for decisions you can't just redo, Opus is the safer bet.
Also, if Sonnet 5 fails a task a couple times, escalating to Opus is a good move.
So basically, if Sonnet gets stuck, you hand it off to Opus.
What seems to work well in practice is a two-stage setup. Plan with Opus, execute with Sonnet 5. Let Opus handle the planning phase where reasoning matters. Then run execution on Sonnet.
So you're combining Opus's brains with Sonnet 5's persistence. But as agent capability goes up, doesn't the risk of misuse go up too? That's kind of scary.
Yeah, Anthropic's clearly thinking about that. There's actual safety data behind it. There's this score called misaligned behavior. It measures how often the model acts against its intended purpose. Sonnet 4.6 was at 289. And for Sonnet 5, that's dropped to 253.
Oh, so the lower the number, the safer it is. So it's actually improving.
Though Opus 4.8 is at 210, so it's not quite at the Opus level yet. There's another interesting data point too. On a Firefox exploit development task, Sonnet 5's pass at 1 is 0%.
Wait, so even if you try to get it to write attack code, it just doesn't succeed at all?
Exactly. Mythos 5, the comparison model, is at 88.4%, so the gap is huge, even with high agent capability. The safeguards are keeping offensive use in check.
Capability and safety both holding up together, that's actually pretty reassuring. Using it as a one-shot tool, this whole time was such a waste.
Right? Because you never touched planning or autonomous execution before deciding performance doesn't change.
So how should we actually use it?
My recommendation is to make Sonnet 5 your default in Claude Code first. Run all your everyday coding tasks agentically.
What if it gets stuck?
Only escalate to Opus 4.8. For tasks Sonnet 5 fails on 2 or 3 times, the price stays the same as Sonnet 4.6, and the performance is closing in on Opus. There's no reason not to try it.
Run it on Sonnet first, escalate to Opus if it fails. Simple?
Move on from one-shot Q&A, and try trusting it as an agent.
Sharina's changing how she works starting today too.